Still at it, old man. Trying to earn a medal with that mower. That's what a young soldier joked as the man trimmed grass outside the barracks gate. The older man just smiled, wrinkled quiet and unnoticed. But when a colonel pulled up, minutes later stepped out and snapped to attention. The laughter stopped because the man with the mower wasn't just a gardener. He was the one who once led them through fire. If you believe leadership is proven, not posted, comment, salute below. Every morning at 6:00 a.m., folks at Fort Ashton would see him, an old man in worn combat boots, pushing a beat-up Toro mower across the grass lining the barracks road. The machine was almost as old as he was, both somehow still functioning despite the years etched into their frames. No one paid him much attention. Some assumed he was just a local retiree doing part-time work to supplement his income. Others thought he might be one of those veterans who couldn't quite leave military life behind. A few wondered if he was simply confused. He never asked for pay. The base had stopped officially hiring groundskeepers years ago, when they contracted maintenance to a private company, but he kept showing up, tending to edges. The contractors missed, straightening bent signs, picking up litter. Others walked past. Routine keeps the mind sharp, he would say softly to the few who greeted him, his voice weathered but clear like stones, polished by decades of flowing water. Young privates passed by, some nodding politely, most ignoring him completely, a few smirking behind his back. "Old man thinks he's still in uniform," one said under his breath to his buddy. "Probably got discharged as a PFC and now pretends he was somebody." A sergeant newly transferred to the base joked loud enough to be heard as he led a morning PT group. "Pick up the pace, ladies. Don't make me get the old guy to mow you into shape." The old man didn't respond. He simply adjusted his cap, a faded army green with no insignia, no rank, no unit patch, just well-worn fabric shaped by years of sun and rain. That Wednesday morning, while trimming near the flagpole, he stopped his mower and stood at attention as the national anthem played from the loudspeakers, signaling the 0800 flag raising. His posture straightened years, falling away from his spine as muscle memory took over. A group of young recruits waiting nearby for their morning briefing noticed and chuckled. One even took a photo with his phone captioning it "Stolen Valor" before posting it to his social media account. The old man finished his work, as he always did, wiping down his mower, before storing it in a small shed by the side gate. He walked off base with the same quiet dignity with which he had arrived, saying nothing to those who had mocked him. What no one knew his name was Richard Hale, and decades ago he wore stars on his shoulders, not grass, stains on his knees. He had commanded battalions in Vietnam, led rescue operations in Grenada, and eventually commanded Fort Ashton itself during its most active years. But that was a lifetime ago. Now he was just an old man with a mower, or so they thought. Word got around the base that a weird old guy was mowing the grass at the barracks for free. It became something of a joke among the newer recruits, a mascot of sorts, a harmless eccentric they could laugh about during downtime. "There goes the general of grass," they'd say when he appeared, the saluting mockingly behind his back. The photo posted online gained traction, shared among military groups with captions ranging from amusement to concern. Some veterans commented about mental health issues, others about homeless vets desperate for connection. Eventually, someone filed a formal complaint to base administration. "Unknown civilian regularly accesses base perimeter without credentials. Potential security issue. Who authorized him near the barracks entrance?" Security protocols had tightened considerably in recent years. The days when local civilians could freely enter military installations were long gone. Questions were raised in command meetings. Forms were filed. Procedures were cited. Base security was called to address the situation that Friday morning. Two young MPs approached him as he trimmed the edge of the parade ground with meticulous care. "Sir, we need to see your base access credentials," one said, hand resting cautiously on his holster out of habit. The old man straightened, wiping sweat from his brow with a faded handkerchief. "Don't have any current ones. Never needed them before. You can't be on base without proper authorization," the second MP explained, tone professional but firm. "How have you been getting on base each day?" "Walk through the side gate," he replied simply. "Been doing it for 7 years now." The MPs exchanged glances. The side gate was supposed to be monitored by camera and secured at all times. "Sir, we'll need you to come with us to the security office to sort this out." Without protest, the old man shut off his mower and followed them. Inside the office, a lieutenant reviewed his information. You don't have a work badge. You're not on any contractor list. You can't just be here, the lieutenant explained, with the exasperated patience of someone dealing with a confused elderly person. The old man simply reached into his back pocket and handed them a folded, somewhat yellowed document, an Army retirement form dated 1987. I served here once, he said quietly. Just keeping the place sharp, General Matthews knew. So did Colonel Bergman before him. They glanced at the document, noting the name but not the rank listed. Both Matthews and Bergman had rotated out years ago. Look, Mr. Hale, the lieutenant said, I appreciate your service, but this paper's not worth anything here now. You need current credentials. Times have changed. He was escorted off base, his mower confiscated as abandoned equipment on government property. He didn't argue, just walked with dignity through the main gate, nodding respectfully to the guards who watched with mild curiosity. That weekend, a photo of him being removed mower nowhere in sight circulated on social media, taken by one of the same recruits who had mocked him earlier. Comments poured in from military groups across platforms. Leave the poor old guy alone. What harm was he doing? He's probably just looking for connection, Tim. Bet he served more than the jokers laughing at him. But one comment stood out, simple and authoritative. That's Lieutenant General Richard Hale, former commander of the 3rd Infantry Division, decorated with the Distinguished Service Cross and Silver Star. I served under him in Operation Urgent Fury. He commanded Fort Ashton from 1982 to 1987. This is disgraceful. It came from a verified account belonging to Colonel David Rourke, the current commander of Fort Ashton, who had been away at Pentagon briefings for the past 2 weeks. Monday morning, 0800 hours, 3 Humvees pulled into the small town adjacent to the base. They drove directly to the modest neighborhood where property records showed Richard Hale resided. Soldiers dismounted and secured the area with practiced efficiency. Colonel Rourke himself stepped out of the lead vehicle and approached the small, single-story home where Hale took his morning coffee on the porch. General Hale, he asked, standing at the foot of the 3 worn steps. The old man stood, recognition flickering in his eyes. Colonel Rourke, good to see you back. Sir, I've just learned what happened. Why didn't you tell them who you are? Hale took a sip of his coffee, considering the question, with the measured thought of a man who had made life or death decisions affecting hundreds. If they can't see it, he finally replied, they're not ready to follow it. If you believe real leaders never stop serving, share this with someone who leads by example. Colonel Rourke called an emergency assembly at Fort Ashton that afternoon. Messages flashed across computers and phones throughout the base. Mandatory formation, 1400 hours. Parade ground, full uniform, no exceptions. Speculation ran wild. Some thought it was a surprise inspection. Others worried about budget cuts or deployment orders. No one connected it to the old man they'd escorted off base. At precisely 1400 hours, with the Texas sun beating down the entire complement of Fort Ashton from fresh recruits to senior officers, stood in perfect formation on the parade ground. The same ground the old man had tended so carefully for years. Colonel Rourke stood on the reviewing platform, his expression unreadable, behind mirrored sunglasses. Beside him, conspicuously empty, stood a single chair. At 14:05, a civilian van pulled up to the edge of the field. The driver, a sergeant in dress uniform, opened the passenger door with formal precision. Richard Hale stepped out, still in his old boots and work pants, still quiet and unassuming. The only difference, he'd put on a faded blue button-down shirt instead of his usual t-shirt. A confused murmur ran through the ranks, quickly silenced by sharp glances from NCOs. Colonel Rourke approached the microphone. Attention to orders. The formation snapped to rigid attention. For those of you who don't know me, I am Colonel David Rourke, commander of this installation. I've been away at Pentagon briefings for the past 2 weeks. In my absence, a significant breach of military tradition and respect occurred. He gestured toward Hale, who stood calmly at the edge of the platform. This man led men through the jungles of Vietnam and the beaches of Grenada. He designed the survival training manual you all still use today. He commanded this base from 1982 to 1987 as a lieutenant general with 3 stars on his shoulders. Under his leadership, Fort Ashton became the premier training facility in the Army's Southern Command. Silence fell like a stone across the parade ground. Realization dawned on hundreds of faces simultaneously. For the past 7 years, Lieutenant General Hale has voluntarily maintained the grounds of this base, not because he needed to, but because he believes what he taught all who served under him: a leader's job is never done. The same soldiers who had laughed now stood stiff and pale, eyes fixed forward, unable to look at the man they had mocked. Colonel Rourke walked deliberately to where Hale stood and rendered a salute so sharp it seemed to cut through the very air between them. "Permission to continue following your example, sir," he said loud enough for all to hear. Hale returned the salute, emotion flickering just barely in his steel-gray eyes. "Permission granted, Colonel." The battalion commanders were called forward, each saluting the man in work clothes with the same respect and they would show the current chief of staff. Then unexpectedly, a young private stepped out of formation. It was Jenkins, the same soldier who had posted the mocking photo online. He marched forward, stopped at regulation distance and saluted. "Sir, I'm sorry for what I said, for what I posted. I didn't know." Hale looked at him, neither anger nor condescension in his gaze. "You only said what you saw, Private. But next time look harder. The uniform doesn't make the soldier makes the uniform." Jenkins nodded, blinking rapidly against the sun and emotion. That evening, as the base returned to normal operations, a small ceremony took place at the side gate, the entrance Hale had used daily for his self-appointed duties. A bronze plaque was installed, unveiled by Colonel Rourke himself, in honor of Lieutenant General Richard Hale, who never stopped watching over us. Next to it sat his old mower, retrieved from base storage, now mounted on a simple pedestal, transformed from an object of mockery to a symbol of humble servant. The soldiers who had laughed loudest were assigned to complete the work Hale had been doing, mowing, trimming, and maintaining the areas he had tended. Not as punishment, but as education. You'll understand the difference between maintaining appearances and maintaining standards. Their sergeant told them. The general understood. Now you will too. General Hale never returned to mow the grass at Fort Ashton. He didn't need to. Every morning at 0600, rotating squads of soldiers now took responsibility for the grounds, paying special attention to the areas along the barracks road, around the flagpole, and near the memorials. So all the places the general had tended with such care. They worked in respectful silence, often thinking about the old man who had done the same task without recognition or reward for so many years. When asked if he missed his morning routine, Hale simply smiled. "Leadership isn't about being seen doing the work. It's about ensuring the work gets done right even when you're gone." Colonel Rourke instituted a new tradition at Fort Ashton. Every week, a different recruit was assigned to read General Hale's complete service record as part of base orientation. This, they were told as they studied accounts of his battlefield courage and peacetime innovations, is what honor looks like in work boots. Private Jenkins, whose mocking photo had inadvertently led to the general's recognition, requested and received permission to interview Hale for the base newsletter. The resulting article became required reading for all personnel. When asked why he had never corrected anyone or identified himself, the general's answer was characteristically straightforward. "Respect based on rank is protocol. Respect based on actions is leadership. I wanted to see which one this base valued." On Veterans Day, Colonel Rourke invited Hale to be the guest of honor at the base ceremony. Though initially reluctant, he finally agreed to address the assembled soldiers and families. His speech consisted of just one sentence: "The best commanders lead when no one's watching." The crowd stood, many openly wiping away tears, saluting the quiet man who had never asked for thanks but had given a masterclass in leadership every day for 7 years. Hale's influence extended far beyond Fort Ashton. His story spread throughout the Army, then to other branches, becoming a case study in leadership training programs nationwide. And at the end of every day, at Fort Ashton, a new tradition began. The youngest soldier on duty walks to the gate where the general's plaque stands, renders a salute, and whispers 5 words Hale once said when asked why he kept mowing. "I never left my post." Future generations of soldiers who pass through Fort Ashton may never meet the quiet old man with the mower. They might never hear his voice or see his hands calloused, not just from decades of military service, but from years of voluntary labor. But they will learn his most important lesson: that true leadership isn't about stripes on sleeves or stars on shoulders. It's about showing up every day without fanfare, without expectation, and doing what needs to be done. Subscribe to Steelheart Stories if you believe true rank is earned in silence and remembered in service. Yeah.